Welcome to episode 60 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Myers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. In this episode's main segment, I'm interviewing writer Beau Williams. We're going to be talking about his latest film, Americons, which he's also the lead actor in, so stay tuned for that. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread the word about the podcast. Over on YouTube, I want to thank Radical Soul Productions, Ginger Shine, and Stanford Crane for leaving me nice comments on episode 57 and 58. Thank you guys for that. Thank you everyone who subscribed to the Selling Your Screenplay YouTube channel. The channel has almost 600 people. I think as I'm recording this now, we're at 590. So if you use YouTube, please do go ahead and subscribe to our channel. Over on YouTube, I want to thank Maria Martinez and Screenwriters Fest, who retweeted various episodes last week. Thank you guys for those retweets. And on Facebook, thank you everyone who liked our page on Facebook and shared the various posts from last week. There's a good amount of activity on our Facebook page, so I do keep an eye on it. I look at all the messages and questions and comments that come in through our Facebook page, and I try and respond to them all. So that's a good way to get in touch with me if you're looking to just touch base or ask a question. You can find our Facebook page at facebook.com/sellingyourscreenplay. A couple of quick notes. Any websites or links that I mention in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcast, and then just look for episode number 60. Also, if you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks, along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide, how to write a professional logline and query letter, how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. It really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. A quick few words about what I'm working on. I talked to and emailed last week with producers for 2 of my projects. I've mentioned these projects on the podcast before, so I'll just give a little update. My limited location horror thriller script, the producer is still out there trying to raise the money for it. We've been having some conversations about shooting it on a micro budget, which I'm happy to do if he can raise the money. He's got some money raised already. Just a question of if it's enough to shoot this script. Hopefully it is, but we're just kind of going back and forth. He's looking for some locations and just seeing what he can do with the money that he has. And I emailed with the producer of my limited location female protagonist sexy thriller script. She is still plugging away with that script too, so that was nice to hear. She sent it out to a few actors and is waiting to hear back from them. The big hurdle with independent film is raising the money. So I think once she has a cast that she likes, I think then she will start to really concentrate her efforts on going out and getting the money. But that's a huge hurdle. Even if she gets some good actors attached, raising the money will still definitely be a big challenge. So anyway, there's still a little action on these 2 options, so that is a good sign. I completed the first act of a limited location mob action thriller script that I've been working on. I read it in my writers group last week, and I'd say it got a so-so reaction. I have a few things to shore up. I got some good notes. There's always some things, as long as I've been writing scripts, there's always some things that you just bring it into a group of writers and they point out some things that you just can't even believe that you missed. So I've definitely got a few things that I've got to go back and fix. I'm really trying to keep this one super low budget. I've mentioned this before on the podcast. I've talked with a lot of producers over the last couple of years who really want to shoot something. They just need a script that they can be shot on a micro budget. So I'm really trying to keep this one as small as possible so it can be shot on a micro budget, even smaller than the other 2 scripts that I just mentioned, my limited location horror thriller script and my limited location female protagonist, sexy thriller script. Those are limited locations, but there definitely is quite a few actors, and it's pretty broad in terms of it's limited locations, but it's pretty broad in terms of getting those locations. They're not easy to get locations. This script is going to be shot in a house that could be easily gotten. Almost all of it's going to be 2 actors in a house, so it could be shot easily, and getting that location could be fairly cheap and easy. So hopefully it turns out halfway decently as well. We will see. So now let's get into the main segment. Today I'm talking with screenwriter and director Beau Martin Williams. Here is the interview.
Welcome, Beau, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Ashley.
So to start out, I wonder if you can give us a quick overview of your career and kind of how you got started in the entertainment industry.
Yeah, my first passion has always been as a writer, and I started writing in college. I took my first screenwriting class. A creative writing teacher actually suggested that I take a look at screenwriting, and so I think my junior year was my first class. I've really been working on scripts and writing scripts since I was 21 years old, and it's a craft that it really takes some time to get good at. And the first idea that I had for a screenplay was around this bank robbery. I had this bank robbery that I thought was really cool, and I tried to make that the focal point of this screenplay, and I finished it after years of pounding the pavement on it. It was actually something that I had begun working on for a final project in the screenwriting class in college, and I think 5 years later I actually finished it, and I was shopping it around with family friends. And a really close family friend of ours, Bobby Urbex, who created Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, read it, and he asked me, he said, "Beau, what do you know about robbing banks?" And I said, "Nothing." He goes, "You just, played football at the University of Colorado. Why don't you write about that? That's something that's pretty big that people want to learn about." And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, what the heck do you know about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? But that's a different story. So I started working on a script about my experience playing football in college, and I actually did a speech in public speaking class that was it was a persuasive speech on why I thought that college athletes should be paid. College football was a $5 billion a year business when I was playing. Who knows what that's grown to today? That was 2001, 2002. And I was shopping that around town. Everyone said, "Oh, you've got an independent themed project." I had a buddy that was working at Hatton Madison, and they were doing The Longest Yard at the time. He said that the production budget was $50 million for that movie, and then they had another $50 million for an advertising budget. And I was trying to get something made that was on an independent theme with a studio budget, and the studios are all kind of invented again today. So if I'm going to make something, if I'm going to write something with an independent theme, it should probably have an independent budget. And about that time, while I was shopping it, I had left a job working at the door at a nightclub in Hollywood, and was recruited into the mortgage industry. And I've always been a big fan of Boiler Room. And I said, you know what, I'm going to take a crack at writing a Boiler Room type script, but in the mortgage industry in Los Angeles. And because we really did get kind of lucky. I mean, the economy and the worldwide economy were a little bit unlucky, but I think that helped our chances. And while we were writing the script, we had no idea that was going to happen. Just trying to unfold it in front of my eyes while I was working for the bank.
Yeah. Let's take a step back. So you had the one family friend that did Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and you said like your second script about college athletics, you were shopping that. Give us just a little bit of background. I mean, when you say you're shopping it, I assume at this point you're giving it to more than just the one family friend. And so how did you make some of these other connections, and what did that exactly mean when you said shopping it?
Well, shopping it, I'm trying. I don't think I would ever solicit my script as far as trying to shop it. I would give it to people and ask them for feedback, and hoping that they would, either know somebody that was, that could help me bring the script to life, help me get it made into a film, or B, they could connect me with a manager or an agent or somebody that could help me. And so I would give it to anybody and everybody that was willing to read it. And I think of the people that I put it out there too. I mean, maybe half of them actually read it, and maybe half of the people that read it actually gave me feedback. But I mean, I think feedback is valuable as a writer. It does nothing but help. Initially, you can be sensitive sometimes to feedback, but I think that the harsher the feedback, the stronger the feedback. It really helps to fine-tune stories and get them to where they need to be. But you know, I guess I wasn't shopping. I was trying to gain exposure in the hopes that I could land an agent or manager or somebody to help me get it out there.
Yeah, yeah. And just even to dig a little bit further, so, I mean, you said you're working at a club in Hollywood. I mean, literally you just meet someone there, you get their email address and say, hey, can I send you my script? Just give us sort of a full idea of sort of the scope of what you were doing, because I think that can maybe help other people and give them some ideas for their own scripts.
Yeah, I mean, there were some people that were regulars. So I mean, we had regulars who would come in that were working on TV shows, or were agents, or were managers, or were actors. And I was the face of the door when they came in. If they came out and smoked a cigarette, if there's nobody else outside, I'm the one they're hanging out with outside the door. And it's really about just developing relationships. I think first and foremost, it's tough. If you don't know anybody, it's tough. I mean, I'm sure I know there's a lot of good actors in this town that maybe for one reason or another haven't made it. And I'm sure there's a lot of good writers in this town that haven't made it either. And to be honest, the route of shopping scripts or trying to find somebody who's going to get behind it, it's real tough. I mean, I know that writers get their stuff picked up. Maybe they sell something and it doesn't even end up in production. And we had 3 production companies that tried to option Americons, which was initially titled The Option Arm, based on the Option Arm home loan that was very popular while I was working for Washington Mutual in Beverly Hills. But I'm not. Go ahead.
So let's dig into Americons for a minute. Maybe to start, you can just give us a quick log line for the movie, just for people that maybe haven't seen it or haven't seen the trailer. Just you can kind of give us the pitch.
Yeah, we had 2 log lines that we're playing with, and we're actually running one through the press and IMDb, and we're running one on our social media sites. And one of them is a broken down collegiate football hero gets a shot at stardom during the 11th hour of LA's subprime nihilism, or of LA's. I'm sorry, I'm starting that over. A broken down collegiate football hero gets a shot at stardom during LA's nihilistic subprime mortgage boom. That was one log line that we're running with in press, and the other one is that we're running with in social media is raving through realty on the eve of the economic collapse, a storefront viewed through the eyes of a Los Angeles mortgage broker.
Yeah. And as I said, I would even say, as I said, it reminded me Wolf of Wall Street, as I said, with heart, because your protagonist really had seemed to have a conscience about him. So you wrote the script, and on IMDb it says that it gives you also writing credit, and then says co-creator with Matt Funk. Maybe you can just explain what that actually means, how Matt Funk was involved in sort of the initial kernel of this idea, or what a co-creator means on a feature film.
Yeah, Matt was working at 40 Deuce as a bartender while I was working the door there, and we started hanging out on off nights. We realized that we had a great passion for film. We shared an interest in film. We shared an interest in the same kind of films. And I went to him about a year into my job at the mortgage bank that I was working for, and I said, hey, how'd you like to do a boiler room based in Los Angeles about the mortgage industry? And he was pumped about it. So we just started brainstorming ideas, and as things continued to unfold in front of my eyes while I was in the business, we started shaping the script and networking, or not networking, but workshopping characters and really building this thing out. And with every sorry, I got another call coming in. With every completed draft of the script, we would then take it out, like I said, and try and get feedback from everybody and anybody that was willing to give it to us.
Okay. So
and
then
the feedback would come in, and then we'd go back to the drawing board. I'd tailor a new draft of the script. He'd read it. It'd start with his feedback. We'd workshop scenes. We'd redevelop it. We'd rewrite it. And when we got to another point we were happy with, we'd send it back out there. And that went on for a very long time. And really, when we started this thing, the financial market didn't come completely crashing down until 2008. We started working on this script in 2006. So the thing was really still unfolding in front of our eyes. as we had this project or this script that was completed. So we didn't really know how it was going to end yet.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so how many drafts would you say you wrote over the course of this 4 or 5 years?
Man, I joke all the time. I probably wrote close to 4,000 pages to shoot a 76-page script. and that's no lie. In my garage right now, I just moved to a new place. I kept each draft of the script, and I've got 2 boxes full of scripts as well as 2 duffel bags full of scripts. Just different drafts, different titles. We changed the name about 60, 70 times on this thing, and it has been a heck of a journey seeing this thing come to fruition. The original shooting script was also the original final script that we shopped around. Like I said, we had 3 production companies try and option the script. That, I mean, the way they didn't want to pay anything for the option, this thing would probably still be sitting on the shelf signing one of those options. But we shot 76 pages. It was 108 pages. We killed 32 pages of puppies there, and there's a lot of stuff in there that I didn't want to lose, but. You know, we brought our producer, Mike Massini, came on. He said, you know what, there's a lot of great information over there, but a lot of this is you're going to lose your audience with a lot of this stuff. So it was a constant battle between me fighting to not want to dumb it down and then them saying, okay, well, how would you explain this to a first grader? And I think that it's pretty intelligent. There might be some stuff that goes over the head of the audience, but for the most part, I mean, if you pay attention, you should be able to understand it.
Yeah. No, I thought you guys did a great job with that. I mean, I've never worked in that business, so I'm certainly the layman in that terms, but I never got, I mean, even though I knew I didn't understand the intricacies of this thing, as, you know, for the purposes of the story, I got the basic idea of what was happening. So yeah, no, well done on that stuff. I wonder if you can take us through your workshop process. You keep saying you would workshop scenes, workshop different characters and stuff. Just tell us what that is. I mean, you acted in this script too, so I assume you probably know a lot of actors and that probably comes into it. But explain what the workshop process is for developing something like this.
Well, the workshop process for Matt and I mean, there was two processes. One was we'd hit a crossroads. It's nice to have somebody that you can go to when you hit a writer's block point and you're like, shoot, I don't know what we're going to do here. And we kind of bounce things off each other. We bounce things, and then one of us would call the other one and say, dude, I got it. And a lot of times it was ironic, but it would almost happen simultaneously. I'd start to say something, and then he'd already know what I was going to say before I finished what I was going to say for how we were going to twist it. And that was one process, is trying to get over hurdles together. The other process was actually acting, or actually becoming these characters, me playing Jason and him playing Devin, or touring around with the other characters. I think that the most difficult thing for us as males is developing the female characters. And, we are working on another script right now called 351, which we're actually going to take out to some actress friends of ours to help us really, really dive into those female characters and shape those characters.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now let's talk about some of the choices. You just mentioned, like, you had this 108-page script and you really had to slice it down to the 76 pages. That was one thing that, as I just mentioned, it felt like, the Wolf of Wall Street with heart. And, that was one thing I think you guys did very, very well, was you made your protagonist very likable. Almost from the get-go, he seemed to have a conscience about this thing and felt guilty about the potential problems that he might be getting his friend in with refinancing his house. And I'm curious how much of that was very deliberate. Was that how you were feeling when you were in the situation? Or is that something that came later? You realized you had to make your protagonist likable. Just walk us through sort of that decision-making process, because it was integral to the story, and I thought it was a very smart decision. And I wonder if, in reality, that was really sort of how you saw it when it was actually unfolding in your life as a someone working in the financial industry.
Yeah, I never made a whole lot of money in the mortgage industry, because in order to sell something wholeheartedly, I have to believe in what it is that I'm selling. And I only sold, in my entire mortgage career, I sold one option arm loan. And I tried to talk the guy out of it. I explained to him why it was a bad loan. I told him what was going to happen, what was on the horizon, because the boss that I had in New York wasn't selling option arms. He couldn't believe that there were people in Los Angeles who were selling these home loans. It was a 4-payment option loan that gave the borrower a 1% minimum payment option, but it was designed for real estate investors who could leverage their cash across multiple properties with low monthly payments while they fixed the property up and turned them over real quick. What it did when it was rolled out to the mass public is it allowed people who had no business getting into $1 million homes to be able to not only qualify, but also be able to afford their payments. Now, what happened at the end of the loan would eventually recast when the loan balance reached 118% of the loan's original balance. You had an interest-only payment and a 1% payment. Most people made the 1% payment, but the difference between the interest-only payment, which on $1 million loan, say would be like $5,500 at 5.5%, and the 1% payment would be around $2,700. So you have $2,300 that's tacked on to the balance of the loan at the end of each month. When that loan hits 118%, that loan would then recast, and the mortgage broker could then would then go back to the client. The client would have to refinance because they can't afford $5,500 a month. They'd have to refinance, and that mortgage broker would then get another commission on the loan. So they're getting a commission on the loan every 18 months. This is what people were doing in the business. I recognized it as you're not helping the client. All you're doing is helping yourself. And I couldn't sell that product. So I made the bulk of my money in 2007, and I didn't make a lot of money. I spent 3 years in the mortgage industry, and I came out of the mortgage industry with about $10,000 in debt, in credit card debt. So I made $80,000 in the summer of 2007 selling against the option arm home loan. I put together a mailer campaign. I had a list of people that had option arms in the greater Los Angeles area, and I sent those mailer campaign out to all these people and said, get out of your option arm home loan before it's too late. I got about 6-7 people out of option arms and into better loans, and then 2008 rolled around, and I was unable to qualify 30 people in the first 2 weeks of January of 2008, and I realized that things were really going to hit the fan. And I left Washington Mutual 2 weeks before they laid off all of their loan consultants nationwide. So I always had a conscience going through this business that there was something shady that was going on here. Kind of like Jason in America, in Americons, I tried to tailor his mindset about the business very similar to how I felt. And so if you feel like there's a lot of heart in the film or in his character, I mean, that was me, really trying to show my true feelings about what was going on in this world.
Yeah. So I can see how a loan like that for a sophisticated real estate investor might make sense because, as you said, but you're right. For an individual who doesn't really know what they're doing, it's disaster waiting to happen. So let's talk about some of the other things. That's always, I get a lot of emails from people that have done something in their life, or maybe they were in a war or some interesting thing has happened to them, and they're saying, "Gee, I want to turn my life story into a script," and I'm always very leery of it. Number one, their lives don't sound nearly as interesting as they think they do, but I'm curious there must have been some things that were in this story that, you had to pick and choose. Well, let's not talk about this stuff. This doesn't make sense. It was an interesting maybe vignette, but it doesn't fit into sort of the overall context of this screenplay. Maybe you can just walk us through that process of turning a life story and some of the choices that you made to turn it into a fictionalized screenplay.
As far as omitting some things and including others?
Yeah, I mean, there must have been some stuff that maybe it was interesting, but it didn't necessarily fit into the script, the context of the script, the story. I mean, the story was very cohesive. I mean, as you say, it was very much about this option arm, but there must have been other interesting things, interesting characters. How did you make some of those choices to not include stuff and to include other stuff?
Well, and I'll go back to, feedback for that. I sought out feedback anywhere that I could get it, and I continued to seek that feedback throughout the entire production process, through the editing process. I mean, there's stuff that we lost in the editing room. We as a team, me, Theo, Matt, and Massini, we reshaped the entire script in the editing room, and then we had some holes. We said, this isn't working. Let's change it to this. And we rewrote stuff and went out and did reshoots. And we did that for about 2 years to really make sure that we shaped the exact story that was going to work. So I had a lot of help in regards to that. Like I said, the original script was 108 pages, and Mike said there was no way we had enough money to be able to go out and shoot the 108-page script that we had. So we hired a specialist to help us shave that thing down to 76 pages. A guy that he knew that was really good with beat points and had read Save the Cat, and he actually rewrote the page numbers in Save the Cat, saying, okay, we need this to happen instead of by page 10, this needs to happen by page 5. Instead of by page 20, this needs to happen by page 12. Mm-hmm. And if you, I make a joke about this, if you're late for the film, if you're 10 minutes late for the film, you're going to show up, we're already going to be in Act 2.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about sort of the next stage of this. You've written a script, you've gotten a lot of feedback, you've got a version that you feel confident about. You mentioned that you had found some interest with 3 production companies. They wanted to do an option. So just walk us through, now you've written the script, what's sort of the next step? How did you get it out there? And how did you find these 3 production companies? And ultimately, what did you kind of do to get this thing made?
Yeah, well, Matt Funk he's got a pretty solid acting background, and so he's known a bunch of people in the industry for a long time. He knew more people in the industry than I did, and we shopped it around director friends of his that he'd worked with, as well as fellow actors. Matt Madrano was an actor-producer that we had shopped it to, and he really liked the script. He thought that there was something huge there. We had other friends that brought us to production companies. They tried to option the project. Other actor friends that brought it to production companies that they knew who tried to option the project, but we didn't really like the angle that they were pitching us on. Matt and I had one production company that said, you know what, we think this script is great. We're going to take it to a writer at CAA. We're going to put his name on it, and we're going to package it with an A-list director, and you guys are going to have nothing to do with it. And we said, no, that's not what we're going to do. This same guy actually told us, he said, oh, you think, and I took my nightlife background. I actually started an events company on the west side of Los Angeles. I came up with my share of the funds to shoot this thing. I threw 500 parties over the course of 5 years, and I had access to a bunch of nightclubs, and I had restaurants that I'd worked with, and I had clients who were well-off clients that allowed us to shoot at their houses. So this guy told me, he goes, oh, you think because you guys pop a couple bottles here and there that you're going to be able to get all these nightclubs for free, and you're going to be able to show off the glitz and the glamour of this world? No chance. And that's what we did.
How much money were they offering you for the script to basically take your name off?
Nothing. They were offering me nothing. They said, you're a no-name writer. Nobody knows you. No one's going to offer you a penny for this thing. And I had two people initially try and option it for nothing. And then I had, probably about 2-3 months later, we had a third company that tried to option it for nothing. 1 cent is what they were going to pay, because I guess you can't technically option a script for nothing, but you have to pay something. And some of the ways that these production companies work is they see a project they think is interesting. They get 5 projects. They take those 5 projects. They go out there and they pitch them to their investors. And if the investor bites, then they go into production. Well, if my script wasn't one of those 5 scripts that was pulled for production, then it's sitting on that guy's shelf. And one of the options said, it was so vague. It said, we have the rights to this project for a year. If we are in financial negotiations during that 1-year time period, then we have the rights to it for an additional 4 years. So I'm looking, if I sign this option, if he takes his 5 scripts to an investor, and the investor says, okay, we're going to make this one, and he decides not to make mine, but he says, but we are also interested in that one. It's so vague. I mean, he could not even, there was no way for me to know that he even said something like that. Now all of a sudden, this guy goes into production on a script that's not mine, and mine gets placed on the shelf for 5 years, and we're sitting here right now, and I got nothing to talk to you about. So Matt and I, after taking 3 different meetings, we said, you know what? If we're going to get this thing done, we're going to have to do it our way. And we put our heads down, and he had saved up a lot of money from Monarch Cove, which is a show that he shot down in Australia. And I went to work, doing the only other thing that I really knew how to do with the connections that I established. After Washington Mutual, I got a job as a marketing manager for a Japanese vodka, and I was the regional marketing manager from San Luis Obispo. all the way down to San Diego. So I had developed a knack for communicating with nightlife managers, and I had a background from being at the door, and I knew a lot of people in the business. And I just went to work. I talked to some friends of mine who were doing events in Hollywood, and I said, "How much money are you making?" "What are you making, $1,000 a night?" And they're like, "Sometimes more." I'm like, "What, 2,000 a night?" "Sometimes more." I said, "Well, shoot, I can do this." And there was nobody doing it in the beach in the beach communities in LA. So we attacked the market where there was a demand with no competition, and things went really well for us. To where after 2 years, I had my share of the funds to shoot. Now, I didn't know that we were going to continue to have to pump money in this thing, for the next 2 years while we were in post. Which, sure. I mean, when we chopped up we did our first edit, and we put all these songs in there, and we got to what we thought was going to be a local picture. And I went to our music soup with the songs, and Matt Funk was really good. He's got a really good ear for music, and he kept giving songs to Theo, and Theo kept putting them in the script, and in the film. He's like, "Dude, these songs are awesome. It's working. It's working. It's working." I went to our music soup, and it came back, and it was $250,000 for the music that we wanted to put in this thing. So we had to go back to the drawing board again and figure out, okay, based on what these songs cost, this is what we can afford, this is what we can't afford, and these are the sections of the film that we're going to have to take back to our composer, Damien Wagger, who does an unbelievable job connecting the tracks that we licensed with his original tracks, which, I mean, that was the last thing that came into place, was really the harmony of the music that kind of creates this waterbed that floats the story to us.
Mm-hmm. Maybe you can take us through just briefly some of the process of actually, the logistics of making this movie. Obviously, at this point, so now you're starting to think with your friend Matt, okay, let's go ahead and make this movie ourselves. But you don't have a background in film production. So what did you do? How did you find the director? How did you find a line producer? What were some of those steps to actually just getting this into a live production?
Yeah, Matt Madrano introduced us to Michael Massini. And Massini had worked with Theo on 50 Pills, which was the first film that he directed with Kristen Bell and Michael Pena. And he'd also worked with him on I think it was a pilot that he wrote or that a friend of his wrote called The Cadillac Crew, where they shot a couple of episodes that Theo and Chris Lightwine, our director of photography, worked on together. And he said, I got the guy that can do this. And he initially said we need to cut 108 pages down to 76 pages. He had the production experience. He helped us put all the pieces together and really assembled our entire team. Now, along the way, we made tons of mistakes. The first director that we brought on was not originally Theo. We brought on a guy out of New York that was underqualified, was in over his head. And after the first day of shooting, we shot one scene, and we said, there's no way we're going to get this whole thing on the schedule that these guys have. I mean, we need somebody who knows what they're doing. And Theo had not gotten back to us yet. So Mike pulled the plug on the project, which thank God that he did, because we would have wasted all the money that we'd saved. And Theo got back to us. He came out here. We met with him. And Theo Mike said, this guy knows how to get a lot out of a little. He knows how to make things look like they're done on studio budgets for next to nothing. And Funk and I took Theo around to all the locations that we had access to, some through my company and some through relationships that Matt had. We shot at my house. We shot at Matt's house. And Theo was like, I'm on board. If you want me, I'm on board. And we decided to bring him on. And I think a month later, I went to Block Island in Rhode Island with him and his family. And based on the locations we had, we retailored the script. He said, "Okay, well, we've got you guys going to the bookie's house to make a bet, and then from there you go to a sports bar, because we can't afford to move more than once a day." And I think we only had 2 days where we had location moves. The rest of the days that we shot for our 12 principal days of photography were all shot at the same location, and find a way to maximize that location to make it look like different locations, which Theo is a specialist at. And we retailored the script to the locations that we had that came back into town, and we sat down with our UPM and we figured out our 12-day schedule. And we packed a ton into 12 days. And I really got to credit our UPM and CEO for that, because I didn't know how to do any of that stuff. I was in film school 101, but I was playing with live bullets because I had all my money into the project.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, no, this is a great story. I just, I was fairly surprised when you said it was done on a shoestring budget. I was very surprised. The film looks great, so my hat's off to Theo and your DP and everybody else. It does look great, so well done on that front. But this is just hearing you explain this is just so educational. I hope there's people out there that are really listening to this, because the stories you're telling is exactly the sort of in the trenches story. If you're going to go and make your own independent film, all these things you're saying are exactly how it happens. You get a director who doesn't know what they're doing. You got to fire them. It's like these are the problems of independent film. So I thank you for sharing all of this. As I said, I just hope people are really listening. This is a great interview. Let's go to the next step of this. So you've got the film shot. How did you ultimately find distribution? You and I hooked up through you have a publicist, and so there's a distribution now for this film. Did you guys go to film festivals? Walk us through that process of you've got the film finished, and then what did you do next to actually find distribution?
One of the reasons we were so attracted to bringing Michael Mussino into the project initially was because he actually worked for Archstone Distribution, and he had, working at Archstone, he had people sending him films to watch all the time, and he had been tutored by Brady Bowen over at Archstone on what works and what doesn't work. So he had a very strong understanding of what we needed to do production-wise in order to create something that was going to attract a distribution company. And Mike knew Brady, and we had a couple other distribution companies that were interested, but Brady said, no, I want to do this thing theatrically to create the buzz and stir up a lot of interest overseas and with the on-demand markets. And if you guys can bring to the table what you think you can from a promotional standpoint, being that I do have, for the last 5 years, I prefer event coordinator, but technically I'm a promoter and I understand that mindset very well. So we tried for a couple of film festivals. We went after Tribeca, Sundance, and in Toronto. However, that said, they got very rough cuts of the film. They got rough cuts of the film that were really pretty sloppy, and I wish that we had waited until we were ready. But even Brady, Brady pitched it to Sundance and said, or Tribeca last year. He goes, guys, this isn't a film festival film. It's not. He goes, it's a theater film, and that's the way that he wanted to take it.
Mm-hmm. So tell me this. I mean, as I keep going back to something like Wolf of Wall Street, and I'd just be curious to kind of hear your thoughts and hear kind of the reception you were getting with this project. This is a very American story, and it also doesn't have, and I would say to its credit, this isn't a snub of the film, but Wolf of Wall Street, number one, it had a whole European arm. It definitely got international, where there's scenes in Italy, and he's going and investing in Europe. There's also a lot more drugs and sex, which is obviously something distributors think that they can sell. So I'm curious, did you get any pressure to maybe open the story up and make it less of an American story? Did you get any pressure to just have more sex and drugs in the story?
We were actually done shooting before Wolf of Wall Street came out, believe it or not. So I didn't feel any pressure from Wolf of Wall Street. I thought that if anything, it could help us. We did want to spice it up. Movies that I was comparing this to were Too Big to Fail and Margin Call and Inside Job. All movies that and even Wall Street 2 when that came out. Those are all movies with a similar theme as far as being movies based in the financial industry. One thing that I thought that was lacking in those films, I didn't think Margin Call or Too Big to Fail, although very informative and great films, which I liked, I didn't think that they were sexy enough to grab a younger audience. Mm-hmm. Our film also moves very fast. We tailored it that way for a younger audience because in today's social media age, they've got Facebook, they've got Instagram, they've got Twitter, they've got Snapchat. There's so many different forms of entertainment for them. that we really needed to move quickly to keep them on the edge of their seat. I don't want to call them the ADD generation, but there's so much content out there for them that you really need to grab their attention. And I think someone told us that the way they test films is they put a room full of a bunch of people in a room, and as soon as they pull out their cell phone, they know that, hey, maybe something's not working here.
Yeah. I'm curious. Did you you mentioned the three options that you got. At that point, were you attaching? Obviously, if you're going to finance it yourself, attaching yourself as an actor is not a problem. But did you want to be an actor in the film when you were looking at potentially optioning it to these outside companies?
We did. Matt and I both did. But at the same time, I said, you know what? If you can get somebody like Channing Tatum attached to the project, I believe that I'd read somewhere that he actually worked in the mortgage industry. I would have been willing to step out of it because I felt that the story that we were telling was more important than me being an actor in the film. But I also knew that I was capable of doing that, which it was tough. It was tough wearing multiple hats, going through this process. So the first day we shot was at my house, and I'm wearing, the producer hat. I'm also wearing the writer's hat. I'm going through these scenes as the writer, making sure, okay, is this happening the way it needs to be happening? We parked the wardrobe truck in my neighbor's driveway, and we put a note. It wasn't me, but someone on my team put a note on my neighbor's fence that said, hey, if you want to park next to our truck, please let us know. My neighbor sends me a text message. She goes, what the F is going on over there? Come outside right now. I go out through the back alley, and she goes, read this. And I go, oh, you got to be kidding me. So I go into our UPM. I'm like, dude, if we're going to park in the neighbor's driveway, we don't put a note on their fence saying that if they want to park in their own driveway, ask us if they want to park next to our truck. We got to ask them if we want to park there. Well, I'm getting called on the set to get into character 2 seconds later, so it was hard. It was wearing multiple hats through this process was definitely the hardest thing I've ever done. I was responsible for majority of the locations too. I mean, I remember waking up at our wardrobe truck that next night got blocked in. We had to be on set at 9. I'm hoping I can get the car out. So I'm waking up at 6 a.m. every 30 minutes to go out to the alley and see if that truck's unblocked so I can pull it out and try and get it over to the next location. And I would have been willing to step out of the project if I knew it was going to benefit the project.
Sure. So ultimately, though, you do feel like you are a writer, not an actor. More, that's the direction you want to take.
I mean, I think that I want to tell my own stories. Yeah, I don't need to be I don't want to go out for projects that I'm not passionate about. I did some auditioning and went out for some projects when I first got to town, and I've taken a bunch of acting classes and workshops since high school. So it's something that I can do, but if I'm not passionate about a project, I'm not just out there looking to do it to make money. I'm not going to sell myself out on a project that has a big price tag on it just to do that. I want to make things that are relevant and that have great messages.
Yeah. So what's next for you? You mentioned another script that you guys are working on. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that and kind of what your plans are for the future.
Yeah, the next script is a love story, believe it or not. It's kind of disguised as a fast action LA story. It's a guy that is a runner for a sports book, and he is rolling around town in a Mach 1 Mustang. Well, the engine in the Mach 1 Mustang is a 351 Cleveland, so it says 351 right on the side of the car. And it's a very charismatic guy that's meeting all these different people from these different walks of life, and he falls in love with a young lady who is working as a hooker at a brothel, and she's at a compound, and it's these two people from these terrible walks of life that love ultimately pulls them out of it. So it's pretty. If the financial industry was the theme of this movie, we're really trying to focus on the power of love in this next film.
Okay, sounds interesting. I look forward to seeing it. So how can people see Americons? Maybe you can tell us it's kind of the release schedule and where it's going to be available.
Yeah, it's actually opening this Friday, January 23rd. If you're in Los Angeles, it'll be at Universal City Walk at the AMC up there in Burbank, at the Burbank AMC 16. It'll be in Torrance at the Rolling Hills 20 AMC in Torrance. It'll be at AMC in Phoenix. It'll be at the AMC River East in Chicago. It'll be at the AMC Westminster Promenade between Boulder and Denver in Colorado, which is actually the theater I used to go to when I was in college. It'll be at the Austin Metropolitan Stadium 14 in Austin, Texas. It'll be in Elmwood, Louisiana. It's at the AMC Empire in Times Square in New York. It's playing in Maple Grove at the AMC out there in Minneapolis area. And what else? Am I missing something?
Nice. Yeah, that sounds like a nice release. So, and then when will it be available? Video on demand, iTunes, and all that kind of stuff. I'm not sure what Archstone's plans are yet. I think probably about 3 months out from the release date. We're hoping that we can drum up enough interest theatrically to where it expands and we get a 2, 3, 4 week run. And then we have to also look into what we're going to do and what our plans are for international distribution. Just through some small Facebook tests and social media marketing tests, we're actually I think there may be more interest in this film overseas than there actually is here, which is interesting. So we got to sit down and brainstorm that with our distributor. But right now, our main goal is focusing on getting this thing to really do well theatrically. Yeah, sure. So what's the best way for people to keep up with you if they're interested in just seeing what you're up to? You know, you can mention maybe a Twitter handle, Facebook page, a blog, anything really that you just want to share so people can maybe learn more about you.
Yeah, I'm on Instagram. I don't really use much Twitter. My Instagram handle is WEAUDIDDLY. We're on Facebook at Facebook /Americons Movie. We're also on Instagram at Americons Movie. We're on Twitter at Americons Movie. Our website is www.americonsmovie.com.
Perfect. I'll get all that. I'll get that straightened out, and I'll link to all that in the show notes so people can just they don't have to write it down quickly. They can go to the show notes and click right over to it. So, well, Beau, you've been very generous with your time. As I said, this has been a great interview. I really appreciate it. It's a real true testament to just independent film and how stuff gets done. So I wish you the best with this film.
Thank you, Ashley. I appreciate your time as well.
I want to announce the new SYS Script Consultant service. We're launching a super inexpensive script reading service. All the readers have experience reading for studios, production companies, or contests. The readers I've partnered with are the gatekeepers. They're exactly the same people who are going to be reading your scripts at the companies you submit to. The readers will be evaluating your scripts on 10 key points like structure, character, dialogue, and marketability. You can read a quick bio on each reader and pick the one that you like to read your script. We're still going to be offering the in-depth screenplay analysis by industry veterans. While I think this is a great service and offers tremendous value for what you're getting, it is a bit pricey for some people, so I wanted to create a service for people who maybe didn't want to invest quite as much money into getting some professional script notes. So if you want a quick, economical way to get notes from a professional reader on one of your screenplays, check out our new service, which you can find at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/consultants. So let's wrap up today's episode. I just want to talk about a few things that Beau said. To me, the real takeaway is just how much Beau made things happen for himself. He didn't wait around. He had some other companies want to option the script. He said, no, I'm going to go and make this movie myself. And hopefully from listening to this podcast, you're getting a sense of sort of why he might have done that. I've mentioned many options that I've had. And as you can see, this podcast has been going now for well over a year and a half. And, some of these options have been going since before the podcast began, and they're still going. And I think Beau really appreciated that and understood that you can get out there, you can find producers who like your material, you can find producers who want to make your script, but getting the money and getting that thing into production, you're still a long ways. Just finding the producer isn't necessarily getting you all that close to getting the movie made. And as I said, I've mentioned a lot of the options that I've had, and a lot of them are still out there. The producers are still out there slugging. year and a half later. So really think about that. You know, there's this, the only real way of making sure that your script gets made is really by going out and making things happen for yourself, going out and raising the money. All these problems that Beau mentioned, making the film, you know, a director being in over his head, having to kill production, go back, all that stuff, that's just part of production. You know, going over budget, it's just all part of production. Having your neighbor complain, it's just, these are all the things that you're going to deal with in being a filmmaker, but that's just part of the process, and you just got to plow your way through it. No one is going to call you and ask you to write their next feature film unless you've done something that was at least somewhat successful. And even if you have had some success, there's still a good chance no one will call you and ask you to write the next feature film. Again, I hope you kind of go to IMDb, look at some of my credits. I'm still out here plugging away, and I'm still trying to make things happen for myself. I've got a bunch of credits, but it really doesn't get any easier. It hasn't really gotten any easier for me to sell my next script just because I've sold a bunch before. You know, there's no producer just waiting to, you know, get your query letter and contact you. You've really got to get out there and make things happen for yourself. I thought this movie that we talked about, that I talked about with Beau, Americons, I thought it was a pretty good movie, but my guess is it isn't going to be a huge, massive indie hit. But that doesn't really matter. I mean, it was a pretty good film, and even with some modest success, this will help Beau get his career to the next level. Now, it may not get his career to that A-list writer level, but it will slowly add up. It will slowly give him a small step to that next level. And what that next level is may not even be quite clear at this point. But getting out there and doing things, doing something that's pretty good like this film, it really will. When Beau looks back on his career, he really will look back on that as a stepping stone up. You know, I've been showcasing a lot of different independent filmmakers on the podcast like Beau. I highly recommend that you check out these films, even if they're not something that sounds all that interesting to you. I mean, there's just this old screenwriting adage, you know, reading bad scripts is something that is also valuable. And I actually like this movie, so I'm not in any way implying that I thought Americons was bad, but some of these movies are better than others. Some of these movies that I'm talking with the filmmakers are better than others. And you really going and watching them, and even if you watch the film and think it's not that good, it's still just good to hear how the filmmaker made the film, watch the film, judge for yourself. Is this a good film? And then see what kind of success this filmmaker has. That can kind of help you gauge your own writing. It can help you gauge your own career. It can help you gauge the value of going out and making your own film by seeing these films. Even if you don't like them, by seeing them, you start to get an idea of, okay, this is sort of what's out there. Look at the production values. I mean, you just heard Beau basically tell you, I mean, it's all funded by himself. So you know this was not a big budget film. It was something that's probably within the means of most of us. One thing I did want to point out too, being in LA, I always get this question as a screenwriter, should I move to LA? You know, one of the things that Beau did, and he takes it for granted, and as do I, since I live in the Los Angeles area, Beau lives in the Los Angeles area, there's just a wealth of very talented people who will work very cheaply. The talent pool is very deep. It's deep on actors. It's deep on all the cast, all the crew. You really can find good quality professional people willing to work for no money or next to no money. So I definitely think that that's something that should be considered in this equation. If you're going to go out and make a film, if you live somewhere in Kansas, it's unlikely that you're going to really find a ton of good actors and, you know, independent and good crew. So the whole thing could unravel for you. So definitely keep that in mind. You know, Beau has been living and working in Los Angeles for quite some time, so he probably had a lot of connections. But even if you don't have a lot of connections, just physically being in Los Angeles, it's easy to meet those people. It's easy to put an ad up, frankly, on something like Craigslist. Hey, I need a crew. I need a cinematographer. And you'll get a lot of responses from local people who have, you know, really solid professional credits. So that's definitely a part of this equation, not to be underestimated. Anyway, I really hope people are listening to these podcast episodes and it's inspiring them to go out and take action. I mentioned earlier in the podcast my limited location mob action thriller. I'm thinking I might try and take my own advice and produce that film myself if I can't find a producer quickly. We'll see. I really want to get something into production this year at any level, and even though I have a bunch of stuff optioned, I know ultimately taking control and producing something myself gives me the best chance to get a movie made, and not just get it made so that the finished film actually resembles what I wrote. And that's, again, if you've been through this process where you've sold scripts, that's not something to be underestimated as well. Anyway, that's the show. Thank you for listening.